The Reverend Dr. G is the senior pastor at the Fountain of Life Covenant Church. He's also the president and founder of the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development in Madison. He and his family have strong ties to UW-Madison, so he and a number of his family members have received degrees from UW. His educational background includes a BA in Economics and Afro-American History from UW. He also holds a doctorate from Boston Graduate University in Seattle, Washington, in Transformational Leadership for the Global City. Prior to serving the Fountain of Life Church and the Nehemiah Corporation full-time, Dr. G worked at the University of Wisconsin for over 7 years in a number of positions. He was a Minority Undergraduate Student Recruitment Officer, Minority Affairs Director in the School of Pharmacy, and Chancellor David Ward's Assistant for Minority Community Relations. So let me frame our conversation a little bit more before having you discuss things at your table. At UW-Madison, we are engaged in an ongoing conversation around the issue of diversity in campus. For example, the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee is in the process of creating a new draft diversity framework. Yesterday, the Division of Equity, Educational Achievement, and Diversity Program on a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. When the discussion focuses on academic achievement, the university has a wealth of data that allows us to talk about the topic. Typically, we're focusing on things like access. Who's applying to the university and getting in? Do they stay within the first year and the second year? How well do they do academically? And typically, end of semester grades are one of the metrics that get discussed. Do they graduate within a 6-year period? And are they engaged in things like high-impact educational practices? What we know from the data here at UW-Madison is that not all students fare equally well. There are clear equity and opportunity gaps, along with gaps in educational achievement. So, thinking about the last time you walked into a room of students, did you stop and reflect on the 18 years of experiences they've had before they walked into that room? Did you stop and think about how those life experiences were impacting their experiences here at UW-Madison? We invited Dr. G today to provide a broader perspective and to reflect on racial disparities that exist both nationally and in particular here in Madison. I'm hoping in the course of our conversation today that we hear about how Dr. G sees disparities at work, the things that the community can and is doing to address them, and importantly, what we as a university community can and do to have an impact on the disparities that exist.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's both an honor and a bit nerve-wracking to be here. When you've grown up in this community and you've studied at this campus and then you come back in sort of a grown-up capacity, it's really kind of interesting. I used to hang out and run Black Student Union meetings in this room in the Memorial Union, but it's so funny to come back with this particular hat on. But it really is an honor to be here. It's always great to connect the community with the university. I know that this campus is a part of the geographical city, but not always a part of the emotional and the social and the cultural part of the city. And so I appreciate the attempts to really begin to reach out to the community. I want to frame my talk a little bit with just a few slides, if we could. You said just take that off? Oh. Because I think statistics have shown us that if we don't really get a handle on racial disparities, that what's happening in our country, particularly when it pertains to African American and Latino boys or men, that we're seeing a disproportionate amount of our folks going into prisons. And so you can just see right here just the amounts of people that we put into prisons. With only 5% of the world's population, the U.S. has about 25% of the world's prison population. So it's really become a huge business. One of the things Mark Maurer wrote in his book, Race to Incarcerate, in the early 70s, there was actually a discussion on the federal level of closing prisons because they weren't really shown to rehabilitate. And so there was a discussion to do that, and with the onslaught of the war on drugs and the war on crime, the arrival of crack cocaine in the inner cities where there was lots going on, women being incentivized to not be married, deindustrialization, white flight, the loss of tax base in many of our major northern cities, for the first time, African American men, even since slavery, found that he didn't have a place in his own family. And so while all of this was going on, which is what I call the perfect storm, prison becomes a booming business. And so we see this happening. We go from almost wanting to close them. I think in that time we might have had maybe 300,000 people in prison. I want to bring it a little closer to home. If there are a few of the other slides, I can just hit those. Gotcha. Thank you, Hannah. I want to bring it closer to home because sometimes when we look at national slides, we just think that's far away and it's not really us. And this is a quote by Chief Noble Ray. If you just look at some of the disparities right here in Dane County, the median household income is $61,000. But when you take a look at where African American families and Latino families are living, you see the disparity. You see what's happening with the numbers of people not graduating. And then you see the feelings that develop. The non-white population is so small, people of color stand out. The demographic changes in neighborhoods that we're not used to, people of color leads to more police calls, unconscious biases. You see this is happening. What I need to clarify here is that when it says African Americans are 30 times more likely to be arrested for drug offenses than whites, we're talking about the same drug offenses. So we're not talking about the propensity to commit those crimes. We're saying for the same crimes, this is what you're likely to see. African Americans are 20 times more likely to be arrested for robbery than whites. And then you see things that 2007 African Americans were stopped for 25% of the equipment violations, broken taillight, et cetera, and 30% of the registration violations. And so I want to set this up as a framework for our framework today to talk about the disparities and what role we have as the university community. Just a little bit of background. Let me just take a moment to do this. This campus is really important to me. And people who know me well have probably heard the story, but this campus is why my family moved to Madison. My mother was a high school dropout and decided to go visit and to come and visit her friends who were living in Madison in the early 70s, 1970. And having grown up on the west side of Chicago, she came here and saw the lakes and students. And again, this is early 70s. She saw students going to school with dashikis and afros and barefoot. And she just said, that's home for me. She took the entrance exam, and because she was always a sharp lady, because she to this day still keeps cryptogram puzzles in her book, in her purse, took the entrance exam and was admitted to the university. So she packed us up. I was 6, my sister was 4, and brought us here. And so in 1970, she enrolled in school on this campus. She was studying, I think it might have been called Black Studies back in those days. Professor Warren, you can correct me. And she was also behavioral sciences and law. So as a kid of a single parent, I spent time on this campus because she would bring us down to the Memorial Union while she took her exams. And back in those days, the old business school, it's Ingram Hall now, but that was the business school, they would actually show cartoons. So we as kids could be entertained while our parents took exams. Not knowing that she was modeling something for me, that this would be a place where I would come to school, where my sister would come to school. We both graduated from here. I'd meet my wife here, my last semester of school, and just this week my daughter was admitted here. And so she's going to be starting in the fall. So we're going to have our 3rd generation Badger, and I'm really proud of that. After graduating, I came back to work here in a number of capacities. I was an admissions counselor. I worked I was in charge of Black student recruitment in the Office of Minority Recruitment. I took a job in the School of Pharmacy as the Minority Affairs Director. I did that for a number of years. Then I served as David Ward's Special Assistant for Minority Community Relations. So I feel one way or another, either as a kid of a Badger, or as a Badger himself, or as an employee of this university, that somehow I have come to this campus regularly over the last 45 years with either a toy, a book, a backpack, or briefcase, or on my shoulder or in my hands. And this has been a huge part of my life. And so to be able to talk about these issues and connect the university to it is really wonderful, because one of the things that I learned, that I felt growing up, is that Southsiders, I grew up off of Park Street, rarely crossed University Avenue. No one stood outside with signs and saying, don't come, but we never crossed that. As a freshman here, during freshman orientation, I was selected to be on a team for a scavenger hunt, because they said, he's from Madison, he knows where all the buildings were. I only knew where to find the Babcock ice cream downstairs in Memorial Union. I did not know the other buildings. But when I came here as an employee, I found out that my other academic staff members and faculty rarely crossed University Avenue going south. And so they didn't know where the Boys and Girls Club or the South Madison Neighborhood Center or where the churches were, who the leaders were. And so there's something happening on University Avenue that keeps us from each other. So the fact that we're here today having this discussion about what the university community can do is really wonderful, because part of my job with Chancellor Ward was to find out how do we build this connection. We used to call it town gown. I don't know if you still call it that, but it's called this town gown connection. And I think that we can take some steps towards that right now. Let me just do a couple of things. I was looking at this speaker request form. Information was filled out about how I came here. And it says, this is what we're doing. We're having this faculty training. It's talking about who you all are, and you're quite an impressive crowd, I have to tell you. You're good-looking people. But it says, we offer graduate seminars about issues of diversity in college teaching. And it's funny, I made a note to myself. I said, wait, this is Wisconsin. When do we merely just talk about things? We master information. We wrestle with it. We like to own it and manipulate it and extrapolate what we need. And so I was taken aback by the passive language that we're going to talk about diversity. It's interesting that there's certain topics that we become very aggressive about and others we become very passive about. So I'm speaking with a bit of authority as a product of this great campus, as a member of this great community, that I really want to push us in our thinking and our language. One of the things that Shalala said to a group of young recruiters when she was our chancellor, she said, other universities write about knowledge that we create here at UW-Madison. And I said, that lady is bold. We create the information and the knowledge that other campuses just report in their textbooks. What she said is, we are an elite institution, and we need to act like it. I don't want to see us have savvy and moxie with every discipline imaginable. And then when it comes to diversity, we start walking backwards and mumbling as if we don't know how to wrestle with this issue. We are smart. We are badgers. We do this stuff with information. We master things and then we tell others to follow us. I expect us to really take some bold steps in understanding what's happening in our community so that we can change things. Let me give you a sense of what a 17-year-old black student might be thinking when he walks into your classroom or your laboratory or your dormitory. He's already been told by second grade that he descended from slaves and was never told anything about civil rights or the Harlem Renaissance. Was never told anything about the 16 black men who were elected to Congress during Reconstruction. He came home and asked his mom, were we really slaves? While his white classmates snickered and laughed at him and told him on the playground, you should be thankful to us because we freed you. Because the history wasn't told how his ancestors might have enslaved us, just that we were enslaved because somehow we were incorrigible, savage, and needed some direction. That same kid is told over and over again in a class with only one other black student in a sea of white faces for all of his experience in Madison, Wisconsin, to be told when he constructs a sentence, well, you're a very articulate black man. You have such an admirable command of the English language. Or you're a good-looking black kid, or you're a sharp black kid. Then he sits in his guidance counselor's office, and he's told that he is not material for the university. He tells his counselor, I want to go. My mother went there. I'm supposed to go. I will be the first kid in my family to go to the University of Wisconsin, and he directs me to Madison College. Nothing against Madison Area Technical College, except they don't offer doctorate degrees there. And that was my goal. And so, now that's what the system did, because he was also dumbing down a bit in school, because he didn't think that he was smart, because no one wrote his textbooks. No one but the slave in chapter 7 of history, social studies, looked like him. There was never any references to his contributions, to what his family, to what his people have done for the city, the state, the country, the world. So he goofed off. He didn't get in trouble, didn't go to the principal's office, never got involved with hurting anyone, embarrassing his mother, getting involved in drugs, but he just sort of slid by, was a middle-of-the-road student. He was smart enough to hang out and be eligible to run track because he was a good athlete, but he never pushed himself to take the real college prep classes. So part of what my counselor thought could be justified, but he never called me in and pushed me and challenged me either. And so I was admitted to the university through the academic advancement program. And I love that program to this day. But I came in with a bit of stigma because I thought, I'm not regularly accessible. I'm not regularly admissible. I'm not regularly admissible. No one sold the fact that although the admissions requirements might have been different for me because I show potential, they didn't stress that the graduation requirements are exactly the same. So for a person to come in not regularly admissible, expected to graduate with the rest of the class, should have been met with a couple of attaboys, slaps on the backs, or, well, that's before the high five days, but something. Then you walk into a classroom where professors and administrators may have never seen a student like you. And I watched my classmates leave this campus because in Bascom Hall, 272, whatever the big hall is, one of my classmates sat on this end and another sat on that end because we were taught by advisors, when you take exams, don't sit by each other, sit in the front so the professors recognize you, don't skip because they will see you. And to watch those students be accused of cheating, and there were 22 seats between them. And so when a student comes to this campus, they have had a life of experiences that may cause them to think, I don't fit here, I may not be qualified to be here, can I make it here? And then the faculty looks nothing like you. The students look nothing like you, and they want to touch your hair a lot. And when it's the weekend and they get a few beers in them from the terrace, they want to really get friendly and chummy, and they want to hug you and tell you how they've always wanted to hug a black person or touch a black person. And then we show up to Business 200 and we try to take a 13-page exam because we want to get into business school. Now, these students won't always tell you this because they're too busy trying to prove to their parents they can be here, that they need to be here, and to themselves. But it would be so helpful for someone on campus to understand the baggage and the fear that many carry when they're here. When I was the Minority Affairs Director, a graduate in the School of Pharmacy, a student came up to me and he said, I'd like to interview you, Mr. G, because I really don't like the affirmative action programs on this campus. And I'm going to write a paper for my social pharmacy class proving that the university is wasting its money on all of these minority students who are walking here rightfully, excuse me for saying this, sir, taking jobs, taking positions from well-deserving white students. So I let him interview me, and we did the research. And we got to what Chancellor Shalala called the Madison Plan, and she had something that was called Fast Track. Anybody who was around campus like back in those days, remember the Fast Track? It was money for in-state students. What he didn't know is that I had done my homework. So when he starts talking, I let him say everything he said, and I said, you know, of all the monies that Chancellor Shalala put aside, do you know that only 13% go to students who are Native American, Latino, African American, and Southeast Asian? He said, well, where's the other 87% going? I said, white rural students from Wisconsin. He said, well, how did all of these black students get on campus? I said, the same way you did, the admissions office. And let me tell you something else. Their parents probably went here, and they're probably not qualifying for financial aid, so their parents are probably writing checks paying for them to be here. So in addition to all that students carry when they get here, they actually have students thinking athlete, special admit, taking positions from someone else. And so they know, and students of color know that this is what their fellow students and some of the faculty and staff are thinking as well. Now, it took me 20 years or 30 years to graduate and come back and have the boldness to say this to this campus. So we can't just discuss race relations. We've got to grapple with the issues. We've got to make noise about it. We've got to understand that this might be why we have such a hard time recruiting and retaining students of color. So then when I come, we're having slave auctions on the State Street Mall. Remember the Fiji fraternity? They were doing the slave auctions. Remember the African-American woman who was a basketball player, was attacked and called all kinds of names by a deranged guy on University Avenue right in front of the Discovery Center. He messed with the wrong sister that day. She knew judo and she whooped him up bad. And so these things are going on. So what students need, they need advocates. Because if you don't get your degree from here, it's pretty hard to come back and get tenure here. What I mean is the word on the street is don't come there because of the hostile environment. And if it's no better for faculty than it is for students, we have a morale issue. We have a PR issue. And we keep saying it's cold, the lakes are cold. If we could afford them, then they'd be good enough for Harvard or Michigan. And we can't compete. We don't have the money. We were saying that 30 years ago when I worked here. They're so bright. Why would they come to Wisconsin? Because you're hiring. Why did you come? Why did you come? Why did you come? Why do you come? So to assume that there's a whole different reason for coming is so unfair. When we look at these issues of disparity in our community, do you know how many of these teachers, administrators, principals, and judges were educated on this campus? And we fight diversity as if once the numbers of students we recruit get to a critical mass, then we'll bring in or fly in some faculty that look like them. Black people know what black people look like. We see them all the time. But how are we educating our students from a world-class institution to go into a world that is rapidly changing? And we could let a student out of our care and they have never been mentored, challenged, tutored, or helped by someone of a different ethnic background. How do we even have the gall to say we have educated them? And so the diversity that we're pushing for is not just for the sake of black kids, because they're going to go home and see black people. And at Thanksgiving, they're going to eat with black people. And over the Christmas break, they're going to eat with other Asian people and Native American people, Latino people, and black people. But my daughter's friends who are part of sleepovers, and they're part of her track team, and they come to the house and they call me Mr. G, or some of them Dad, which is weird and kind of embarrassing. However, when Melissa, my daughter's best friend, grows up and someone talks to her about black people, she's going to say, well, I know Mr. G, who was my friend's dad, and I've gone to church with them, and I've gone to dinner with them, and I've gone out of town with them. Her perspective is going to be different. We think diversity is for the people of color. We're comfortable with diversity. We need it for this broader community because we are a world-class institution. I believe that. But we limit our ability to really produce world-class leaders if they don't know what the world thinks, looks like, feels like, and if they keep asking the world, can they touch their hair? We need to take the discussion further. When I was the Minority Affairs Director, because when you take a job on this campus as a minority disadvantaged counselor, you get pigeonholed. It's a nice job, you get pension, you get retirement, but you get pigeonholed because once you work with minority students, they never let you out to talk to everyone else. That's where you're promoted. And so I asked my dean in the School of Pharmacy, may I become the pre-pharmacy advisor? And he said, and I said, really? I'll brush up on my English. Because at this point, I was upset. I'm already making $12,000 less than my counterparts. They gave me an office in the basement. They gave me no computer. I'm an academic advisor with no computer, coming from the admissions office where I am admitting as students and not waitlisting them the way they did my daughter. I could admit students on a rolling basis. I know it's a lot more students. We had like 16,000. They put me in a basement, no computer, paid me $12,000 less, and then said, I think your career is progressing well. But thank God there was a man in the School of Pharmacy named Mel Weinswig, who was the chair of the Minority Affairs Committee. And he and Cab Bond went to bat for me and said, look, this is the work Alex is doing. They got me reclassified. They made me love my job. One of the other professors, if you know any of the faculty at the pharmacy school, Paul Hudson, said, you know what, Alex, screw it. I'll buy you a computer out of my own budget. Just don't tell the dean where it came from. So I could check on the classes, attendance, and grades of my students, which comes in handy when you're an academic advisor. But on this campus, people are fighting for space that's not underground, computers, and the dean did not want me to interact with students. After a lot of complaining, they named me the pre-pharmacy advisor. They said, we'll let you have freshman students. What happened was the white students did not want to leave when they became sophomores. Because by counseling and working with students of color, You get to know their families. You go into depth. You have to really care for them. We rarely talked about academics in my office. We talked about pledging sororities, fraternities, dating, feeling isolated. We talked about life, and I did that with my white students. They did not want to go to the other students who only wanted to talk about Med Chem. I could ask them about their girlfriends, about their lives, about their dreams, and they didn't want to change. So one of the things that you can do is ask yourself, is there someone in your department that a person of color can go to when they feel like there's no mobility, they're stuck, they want to get out of just being the minority pigeonhole person? Is there someone they can go to? I knew exactly who to go to, Mel Weinswig. He went to bat for me. That's something that we can do. If there's a complaint, is there anyone in your department who can go and speak with someone? Do they know who that is? Can they do that without fear of losing their jobs? Is your department connected to the community? The University of Wisconsin-Madison is a part of Dane County. And those statistics are as much a reflection on what you do on this campus as it is on what my church does or does not do, or in every nonprofit in Dane County. This is a reflection on this campus too. And it's amazing to me that I'm still fighting getting funding for our response to all of this. It's a movement I'm calling Justified Anger, because people love what we're doing, but they're frightened by the fact that I have the word anger in there. These numbers have not angered anyone. Leading the nation in the incarceration of black men has not angered anyone. 50% of black boys from 18 to 24 in Dane County being connected to the Department of Corrections is not angering anyone. If I stand up and say, you know what, this has been going on since I was a kid, and I'm pissed, all people, oh. Now that's why there's racism, because you're angry. Not the information. So this is a community where this can happen. As long as you give them a good old soft shoe, everyone's happy. But when you say, wait a minute, this is not right. Mel Weinswig took a risk. A gentleman from a foundation took a risk for me and explained why Alex G had to be angry, and the funding went through. But had he not pushed, they had made a decision, well, we like what they're trying to do, this organizing, but why do they have to be angry? Someone was there to push. Are you willing to take the risk? Are you willing to put your neck out? We all want diversity, but it costs something. Are you willing to be the one that will go to the dean and say, this is not right, he's been in this position for this long, why is he in the basement, why don't they have a computer, where's the professional development, they don't have a budget, they don't have staff, why are they never part of our staff meetings, why are they never leading the retreats, why are we not talking about race relations, why are we not asking them about their recruitment schedule, why are they not a part of the recruitment plan, of the minority recruitment plan? If you see that person being ostracized, or bring them in. I was recognized by the National Association of Social Workers last night, and there was an African student here, and she said, my sister introduced herself. She said, you're only the second person of color that I've met on this campus. Now, you can't be a person of color if you're not and change that statistic, but you can know that if a person of color is in your department, they're probably isolated. And so what resources are you aware of in the community so you could say, here's a great place to go have coffee. Here's a great place to go meet some professional women. Here's a great place. Here's a person you can go to who can tell you things that may seem small to you, but it may be really huge to a person of color. Like, where do you get your hair done? That's huge. When my wife was a student here, she couldn't get nylons at Marshall Fields for black women or makeup. So she'd have to commute to Chicago to get makeup. Now, that's a small thing, but it says the welcome mat is being pulled in. You don't really belong here if you can't buy makeup and nylons here. It's a small thing. I don't know how many people would leave a city because of nylons. But it doesn't put them in a position to say to others, here's how you should come. And so here's how we know this community is ready. And so are we ready to take a risk? Are we ready to put our necks out for someone else? Are we ready to help others? Are we ready to speak out when we see the injustice? Are we ready to take someone in our department out and ask them what to do? And I know many well-intentioned folks from the dominant culture are afraid to bring up race. And it's not a touchy subject to us. Now, your first comment or first question to me, if you don't know me, can't be, how does it feel being black? But we can go out for coffee and you can say, so how are you feeling about things on campus? How are you feeling about the department? How are you feeling about your career? How's your research going? Is there a way it can be helpful, or networking? Just having the conversation. I think so many people are just afraid that if I talk to the person, they're going to think I'm talking to them because they're Asian. But is that worse than thinking that you're not speaking to them because they're Asian? Because it might be why they're thinking, and it might be why you aren't doing it. These seem like small things, but if we can't take those steps, it's so hard to have the policy change. department chairs and faculty. We've been saying for years, we have to hold faculty, department chairs accountable for hires. If everyone just says, we can't find kindergarten teachers, we can't find black wardens, we can't find superintendents, we can't find principals, we can't find people, and there's no accountability, it never moves anywhere. So there's got to be some accountability. Let's set some goals. Let's go someplace different. Where do we want to find them? When we wanted students of color, I was sent to Boston, DC, New York, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois. I was sent to go find them. We have to do the same thing with postdocs, with graduate students. We have to go and do it. But when people come, we have to change the environment as well. The trick is not just recruitment, but it's retention. And if the people who are here are not retained well, they will tell people who are coming, don't come here. And it's been done. It happens all the time. So I would say you begin looking at your department and asking, if I were a person of color, would I see representation? Would I fit in? Would this be a warm community? Would I be isolated? Would I come here and just do my work and go home, not speaking with anyone? Those are some real small things that can happen. And the reason why I think it's so important that the university wrestles with this as I wind this up is because education has always been where we have pulled ourselves out of poverty, out of dire straits, and out of brokenness. And so if our teachers don't have good cross-cultural experiences, their classrooms won't either. And if your graduate students don't have good experiences, then chances are they're not going to tell their friends or stay here or come back here. And so it's so important that the leaders that are shaping our community are coming out of universities. And if universities could hammer some of these issues home about the importance of reading, watching movies, having discussions, getting involved in the community, I think that change of experience would allow them to see this campus differently. All of the people that we look at leading this community come out of someone's university or college. And if we raise the bar and the expectation and the interaction here, we help to change the future. And I think that this university is poised very powerfully in a very beautiful way to really bring about a change in this community. When you have questions, ask someone. When something doesn't look right, say something. Write an email. Ask about policy. Ask if you have a department that really helps people to air their grievances. Because that small step could cause someone to change their mind about their career. And I feel that people like Cab Bond, Paul Hudson, and Mel Wineswick saved my life and my career. And I think we have it. We have the heart in this community. And on this campus, we have this heart for fighting for what's right. But sometimes our fear of appearing to be paternalistic or disingenuous keeps us from having conversations. Only 2 faculty would regularly come by my office to talk with me. How are things going? And it felt very isolated. Just by having conversations, lunch, coffee, building a rapport with your entire department could really change things. I hope I've given you some things to think about. I hope my experience on this campus gives what I'm saying a bit of credibility. I hope that my admiration and love for this city and this campus particularly comes out in my challenges. I believe that we are a world-class institution. I believe that with all my heart. I brag about it all the time. That's why I want my daughter to come here. But I don't want her to come here to the same issues of photoshopping black people at a football game. I don't want her to walk into slave auctions. I don't want her to walk into a 600-person lecture and there's only one other black person. That was my reality. I want things to be different. And I want her to feel that if she wants to go on and obtain a graduate degree, that this is a place she can grow and develop and bring all of who she is to this campus. And I know every parent of color hopes that for their students, just like you do for yours. So thank you all for this time, for allowing me as a community person to come in and share with you. I think that this is great that you're having time to do these kinds of things. This is really meaningful. Continue doing what you're doing so that we can really maximize our potential at this great university. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comments. I really like the way that you changed your position in the pharmacy school from a minority student advisor to a general student advisor. And I guess I have the same question about campus or college diversity officers, where they're trying to do something. The title alone suggests that it's their job to do something about diversity, right? And which really, the good news is it offers a central place for programs, but the bad news is it makes it seem seem like it's not anybody else's job. So what is your thought about that?
I think just stating that more regularly. I think the chancellor's office, the vice provost's office, for whichever office handles the diversity issue, should issue that statement. I think the Department of Admissions should do that as well. I remember feeling the pressure of that. There was a real sharp student. She grew up in Madison. We wanted her we wanted her to accept the Chancellor's Scholar. She went to Michigan because she got a full ride. But one of the administrators said, and it got back to me, if our admission staff can't get that young lady, they need to be fired. And that was a person that worked in the Chancellor's office. I didn't know what kind of authority they had, but we were having slave trades and things on our campus. We were beating up young women, and I had no money. Michigan was offering a full ride, but yet they thought because I looked like her, I should be able to recruit her. It has to be the whole campus. I agree with you. So we just need to blanket the community with that I felt that I needed the university to have my back because her family wanted her to go here, I'm sure. She was born right at St. Mary's Hospital. She was from this community. But I think we had a morale issue and a PR issue. So I agree with you. I think it's all right to have people who will go out as sort of as the sales representatives, but the campus has to sell itself, and it can't be just on one person. That's one of the reasons why I left that role and went to the School of Pharmacy. That was a lot of pressure.
I have a small staff of grad students, about 9 right now, and 5 of them are students of color or biracial. We have a lot of talk in our mentoring sessions about this very issue that you talked about culture. It has changed, thankfully, from some of the things that you described when you had your time here at UW, but it still has a long ways to go. And one of the things that I would like to be able to help my grad students of color with is what are the things, the strategies that we can use, and who can I advocate for it with outside of the work that we're doing. I work with Margaret Nellis. We're in South Madison all the time and working back and forth with Odyssey graduates and Odyssey alums. So we're in it, but we don't exactly know how to reach out better across campus to get others involved.
So you're connected with the community. You're trying to find out how to connect better with campus. I would imagine perhaps informational gatherings like this and inviting people to find out about what's happening in the community could be helpful. As a community person, I love the idea of the campus connecting with us. In my introduction, they mentioned this article that I wrote. I just wanted to say, if you want to find out more about what we're doing in terms of justified anger, there's a website or just a landing page right now. It's called MadisonJustifiedAnger.com. It's a way that you could get involved, take a survey, and find out how to get involved. But my associate pastor reached out to Craig Werner and to Michael Thornton in his department as well to say, as we're training folks, would you help and bring some expertise in terms of training about the history of African Americans in this country? When they agreed, we're very elated. So community organizations would love stronger ties. And maybe as we talk more about this, even in the community or even through campus newsletters, others will say, that's a great idea. How do I get involved? So maybe it's a matter of just publicity and not knowing about it. But I love the fact that your center reaches out to the community because that has not always been the case. But we need it. The need is so overwhelming. And having your expertise, I mean, for example, I'm working on an urban leadership institute because now faith-based leaders want to know, how do you organize churches and run nonprofit organizations? So I have a vision for that, but my expertise is not necessarily in writing curriculum or setting it up. I would love to connect with someone who understands curriculum development or leadership development curriculum and work together. So I think we have to also let the community know that the center is here, because we often talk about how we find volunteers in the community, but I rarely hear people say we need the campus unless they're talking about work study students. We really don't know how to access the graduate students or those with real academic expertise in areas that could help us. I think maybe just a few more talks, maybe we could have coffee or something, but the nonprofits would love to connect with this community much more.
I wanted to ask if you have maybe a wish list of, boy, I wish the university would start working with this organization or start tackling that problem, or any advice you have to us about engaging with the community.
Oh my goodness, yes, that's like asking me what I want for my birthday. Many nonprofits start up because they have catalytic leaders who are very visionary, but we're not very logistical. And so we're not logistical at all. And so the whole idea of metrics, the whole idea of goal setting is so important to us. So consulting with nonprofits on infrastructure things that build capacity and grassroots organization is great. Understanding how to organize is important. So many of us run tutorial after-school programs, so maybe having education majors having a real cross-cultural plunge or experience in our programs would be real great. There are people in our community who travel the country as diversity experts. And I know when you're on a campus, we bring people who know campus life. The beauty of connecting with people from this community is that many of them know this campus and the community, and we could build a bridge. And so those are some things that we could offer here. But I would say certainly planning, help with grant writing, help with curriculum and instruction are things that I hear nonprofit groups talk about all the time. I mean, some of the things are really obvious, like people who can design websites. That's important. But really with curriculum and instruction, again, like that Urban Impact Center, I think that this has some potential to bring people here to learn about the faith-based element and the community organizing element. But if they could come, let's say they're spending a summer and plug into an intensive that's here on this campus, maybe out of the Human Ecology School that talks about nonprofit management, I mean, we could really partner to give people a great experience, and that might be a recruitment tool for future grad students. So I think it starts with the discussion and just understanding we really need the partnership. Most of us don't know the individual. We don't know how to access it. It's like people trying to get a job with the state. They don't know, where do you go if you really want to get your resume in the door? So if we begin to discuss who that is, and I'll leave my card with some of you who serve in that connection or that point person capacity, I will not only will I take advantage of it, but I will pass it along to my colleagues who are trying to find ways to connect.
My question is, what would you like to see the next provost do? Top 3 things in the first 90 days.
I felt that when Chancellor Shalala set her Madison plan, it was David Ward, her provost, who really executed it. I think to convey to the broader campus community confidence that we have a plan, we're going to turn this around, we can do this, this is Madison, blah, 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 and this is what you're going to see in 90 days, a year, 2 years, and really lay it out with a lot of confidence. That was very helpful. We doubted Shalala because we had some other experiences. Then we saw a turnover in the School of Education. We saw a new dean there, new dean in the law school. We saw a new dean in the School of, it's called Consumer Resources and Human Resources and Consumer Sciences, I think. We saw personnel changes. We thought, oh, change is coming. So I think conveying that will be very important. Secondly, but it's very close, doing that in the community. Most of the community members and leaders cannot name anyone outside of the chancellor. Most probably can't even name the chancellor. So really telling the campus, we are going to connect, whether it's seconding students and grad students to the campus, having conferences where we talk and meet, where we have sort of a fair, where we have tables set up for our nonprofit groups and we allow certain disciplines, whether it's law or education, come to a place like this and stop by our tables and talk to us. That would be tremendous. And to explain what we're going to do to get more students of color from this campus, from this community here. What's going to be the whole recruitment, the minority recruitment effort of students, grad students, and faculty, undergrads, grad students, and faculty. I would say those 3 things would really say to me and people like me, meaning community-based folks, this is a serious agenda. It's got measurable items in it, and we really think change is going to come. Our best campus leaders are people who are connected outside the campus. As a pastor, I had to get outside the 4 walls, otherwise I have no relevance. This campus will lose its relevance if it does not get off Bascom Hill and into the community. And the vice chancellor's got to do that, and it can't just be Professor Sims. It can't just be the black person in the community. There's got to be a sign that this university cares about the broader community. This place is supported by our tax dollars. If anyone gets funding from a source, if you were to get an NIH grant, you would show those folks what you're doing in Maryland, wherever it is. This is what we're doing with your money. We know nothing about what's happening with our money. There's no commitment, connection, at least in the community-based level. I'd love to see more of that so we can become champions and send our kids and our friends here.
The question that I have kind of bridges 2 of my worlds. So both in my work, but also I'm a parent of twin boys who are at Leopold. And the question that I have is, do you have suggestions about, so changing policies, procedures, I'm all with them, a systems engineer. And if you don't change people's hearts and minds, regardless of what you do, you're not going to see any changes. So, and I think about that both at the Leopold, so they're talking about changing the code of conduct and the disproportionate discipline, access to honors type kind of activities for students, things like that. And no one's addressing implicit bias. No one's addressing explicit bias as well, and from my vantage. And then also then in my work, I work with 2 employer institutions across the state in higher ed about how to retain, get more students of color here and retain them and graduate them and see them successful. And we're having a hard time interrupting the deficit mindset that folks have, whether it's conscious or unconscious, about folks of color. Do you have suggestions of how to interrupt that and move forward so because they're getting some of it here, you're not getting it here. And it's frustrating. Do you have any suggestions?
I think it comes through interaction, and that's very tough. I think as we objectify information so we can study anthropology and never meet people. And you can do that on this campus. You can study about people on another part of this world and never interact with them and still feel educated. We have to move it to the heart. As a faith leader, I'm always struggling with how do you take concepts that are merely theological and put them into practice. I think the application comes in safe relationship. And that begins with discussions. And so I think like at Leopold, and I'm a Leopold alum, that's actually where I started school when we moved to Madison. And I had friends, because if you're black growing up in Madison 50 years ago, you had to have white friends because that was the way the community looked. What would have helped me is if my white friends and my mom were friends. So what we were doing on the playground, we never saw at home. And so we're wanting our kids to go to school and do things that we never do. So we expect them to sit down with their Lunchables and share, Bobby and Tony, but yet Bobby and Tony have never seen anyone who looks like the other at their own dinner table. So every day they're making history for their families. And so I think it begins with families getting together, not waiting for the PTO to call them together. I think kids don't know how to play sports unless we organize it. They don't know how to play unless we have a play date. Parents don't know how to talk to each other unless there's a school meeting. And I think we have to call people up and just say, hey, our kids play together. Can we have lunch? Can we go on a picnic? Can we talk? And I saw some of that happening as I got older. And I noticed that those friendships were stronger when our parents at least had been in each other's home. It sort of reinforced what we did. I think until you meet real living people and you have a chance to dispel or let go of some of those unlearned or some of those learned things, we hold it until they're disproved. I don't know if that's the wrong one, until they're proven false. Because we hold these things, but I think we're waiting to read it or see a movie or get a pamphlet or be debriefed. I really think change comes the good old-fashioned way, the grassroots, meeting people. Hi, my name is Alex. What's your name? That's really how it works. I mean, I've read a whole lot of stuff about life. My friend Peter is visiting here from New Jersey, but I have an interest in Korean culture. But I found out lots about it sitting in his home, trying to communicate with his mom. I learned a whole lot when I went to Korea with him and we spoke together and talked and processed, but I had to put myself out and I had to go to places I would never go, realizing I'm not going to see a whole lot of people who look like me, or to talk to people or try to wrestle through the awkwardness of language and not wanting to use things wrong, or what if I don't like something I'm eating. I had to press through all of that. But the relationships deepen because we put ourselves in harm's way and we made ourselves vulnerable. I think we're too fearful of vulnerability, and so we become guarded. But I think it really comes down to the parents getting together, talking about what you have in common. I think so often we just want to jump right into the race discussion. But hey, I'm concerned about my kid here. Does your son ever come home and say that the teacher yells or lets the kids, wrestle too much on the playground? Or you'll find that as parents start talking with each other, you can talk about the harder issues. I think sometimes society and the media would lead us to believe we're far more different than we think. And I think we've complicated it. But if we find the places where we have some things in common, and in some ways it's very easy with elementary kids because it's school and you have that in common. What do you think about this art project? Are you sending your kid to the school forest for the sleepover, or, are you doing I think when you start with those little conversations, it really swells into something greater. And I would suggest just starting there. You can't necessarily do it with the masses, just one family, one parent, one group, one block at a time. But I promise you, as you work on that, in my experience, it has really blossomed and has been real fruitful. And if you get a lot of people doing that in small ways in your community, inviting people over, things that we used to do before we had garage door openers, we push the button and just hide from our neighbors. We used to sit on front porches and wave at each other and talk to each other. I think that if we bring that real relational element back, we see a lot of this being changed. I think a lot of what causes racial problems really stems from relational problems. That if we just did a better job of talking with people, respecting people, and honoring people, that crosses cultural lines too. So I'm old-fashioned in that regard, talking to people, opening your hearts, letting down your guards, and allowing yourselves to dispel some of those old myths that you held, and prove some of the ones that have been held against you, to prove those differently.
Dr. G, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.